All right. Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. And today we have the liberal redneck, a comedian of sorts, I guess. Somebody that when my wife told me about, she's like, hey, you need to watch this guy. He's the liberal redneck. And I'm like, yeah, I've seen the act before. Not really that concerned. And then I tune in, and it's a little bit more than that. There's some substance behind the jokes. And we're here to talk to Trae Crowder. How you doing today?
I'm doing all right, Bo. Thanks for having me. I hate to start on a technical question, but I'm going to. I could see you a minute ago, and now I can. Is that what was supposed to happen?
Uh, well, you should be able to see me.
I should. I should be able to.
Should, yeah,
Yeah,
in
I
theory.
can't. It. You. I did before you. As soon as you started recording, your picture went away, and now it's just a little icon that has your initials on it. It says
Uh,
BF. I don't see your picture at all. I
uh,
mean, I can, I can
can you?
handle that, but if I don't, I didn't know if it would mess anything up for you, but yeah, I can't see you.
No, I mean we can go without my picture. Everybody's seen me. Um,
All right.
have
Okay.
like the audio sounds good. Okay though, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
I
good.
can hear.
All right. Okay, so how did this start? I mean, did you just decide that, hey, I'm gonna mask some political content and comedy and go from there? Or where did this
Well,
begin?
I'm actually like I I was a comedian before, like a stand-up comedian. I'm primarily a I call if you ask me if I'm filling out a form that asks for what your job, what your occupation is, I write down writer, comedian, and I always wanted, pretty much always, ever since I was a kid, wanted to be a comedian. And as soon as I got old enough to even start thinking about what types of comedy I would probably do, all of my favorite comedians when I was growing up were the people that were like social commentators, people that talked about things that were happening in society, like actual issues and stuff. My number one favorite and the guy who was the biggest influence on me probably was Chris Rock. But like Chris Rock, Dave Chappelle, George Carlin, Richard Pryor, all of those types of comics were always my favorites. So when I first started doing stand up in 2010, I immediately I would talk about what I considered like, real things. Like I would talk about racism or homophobia, or I'd talk about the Bible or whatever on stage from the very beginning. And then as far as the videos go, I had this stand up bit that I did on stage that was basically what the videos ended up being. It was all about, the premise of it was, I hate how every time you ever see somebody that looks and sounds like me on TV, it's always the same shit. It's the same Bible thumping troglodyte, with a misspelled sign about how Jesus hates big government or whatever. It's always the same thing. So I was like, I need to, I'm going to start fighting fire with fire. I'm going to start going in public and being just as loud and crazy and redneck as they are, but I'm going to say a bunch of my liberal stances to balance the scales, and then I would just say a bunch of liberal shit in a really redneck fashion. And I was doing that on stage, and I talked to people, other comedian friends and stuff at the time, and bounced the idea around of like making videos based around that bit or that character. And everybody I ever talked to was always like, yeah, that's a good idea, you should definitely do that. But I kept not doing it because I thought, oh, I'll need to save up money and buy a fancy camera. I need to learn how to edit and all this stuff. It seemed like a barrier to entry for whatever reason. And then one day in April 2016, when North Carolina passed the HB2 law, I saw a video that was going viral on Facebook on the far right. It was like people I went to high school with were sharing it. That's how I saw it. And it was this preacher in North Carolina who was just standing in the woods for some reason, standing beside his big Dodge Ram, just holding his phone and just hollering at it, preaching fire and brimstone about the evils of, perverts in the bathrooms with our little girls and all this stuff. And not a dick joke in sight. Wasn't funny at all. Like wasn't even trying to be funny. Wasn't even trying to be funny. Just straight up fire and brimstone, and it had 15 million views. And I saw that, and I was like, it's like a light bulb went off. I realized, like, oh man, if this type of thing is what I'm trying to make fun of or satirize, and it is, then I don't need any fancy equipment. I don't need it to look fancy. As a matter of fact, that would be a mistake. Like, what I need to do is do it exactly the way this guy does it. Just go out back and holler at my phone. And that's the style, And as soon as I had that realization, I made the first liberal redneck video like 2 or 3 days after that. And the first one got like 70,000 views or something. And I was over the moon about it. I was like, okay, I guess I'm on to something. I'll keep doing it. And the second one that I made was about the HB2 law, and it went like crazy viral. Ended up getting like around 30 million views on Facebook or something like that, and just like took off insanely. And my like life and my comedy career and all that stuff literally changed overnight as a result of that. I still had a day job at the time. All that allowed me to quit my day job and go into comedy full time and go on tour. And that's what I've been doing for the past 4 years. So that's kind of how it got started. And I'd like to think that North Carolina preacher someday, somehow, one way or another, if he knows about me at all or ever sees any of my stuff, I hope he knows that like this is all his fault. Or I guess it's God's fault. I don't know. Depending on how he looks at it. But mysterious ways, right? But yeah, it was the direct influence on me. But as far as the content of it, it's just, I mean, that it all comes from a very authentic place. Like, I grew up, as long as I've ever had any political opinions at all, they've always been progressive. And I grew up poor in a rural, poverty-stricken part of Tennessee, a very stereotypically redneck area. So like, I've just always kind of been that guy. So like, really, I'm just writing. They say write what you know, and I mean that's pretty much all I've ever done. Like, it comes to me, I come by it all very honest, for sure. Like, I didn't really have to sit and plan or contrive any of that. It just it comes from a very genuine place for me.
Yeah, it comes through. I can see that. And it's funny because one of the things that I watched one of yours was talking about people hide their accents when they leave, and that's something I did for a long, long time. And this channel actually, didn't see any success until I actually kind of the same thing. Started it started as me making fun of myself for the fact that I hid it for so long. Once people found out about it, and then it kind of blew up. Um, but you also bring up a point in one of them where you're talking about the percentages, because there is that image. Anybody that has a beard, wears a ball cap, sounds remotely like we are hard right, like
Right.
ultra conservative bigots, blah, 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 blah. But the
Right.
percentage of votes doesn't really show that. And you brought that up, and it's something that I think, because I have a lot of international viewers, I think it's something that people should be aware of, is that image isn't accurate, like not at all.
Right.
I mean, just liberal Southerners tend to be more quiet about their beliefs because it
Yeah.
isn't the majority viewpoint.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. When all that first happened, I got so many messages. I met so many people in person who said verbally to me some version of like, oh, you're like seeing a unicorn, right? Or like, oh, I didn't know that people like you existed. So obviously this is all coming from people like outside the South, but like no exaggeration, people that literally believed that every single white Southerner, that at least was Southern enough that had the accent that you could tell they're from the South, but every single one of them was like, a Christian conservative or whatever. And like, to me, that's so absurd that anyone could actually think that. But like, people really did, and people still do really think that. Not everybody. I live in California now. Plenty of people do not look at it that way, or plenty of people just don't give a shit one way or another. But it's very much a real thing. And I was aware of that for a long time before I ever even started comedy. I knew that was a thing, and it always annoyed me because, again, I've never fit that stereotype in that way ever, but I've always sounded and everything like I would. So it's something that I've always been like sensitive to and annoyed by. So,
Right.
try to set
Yeah.
people straight.
Yeah. And I actually think it's a service. And again, yeah, I was the same way. I hid my accent. I was a journalist. I was drinking one night and it came out, and they were like, "Oh my god!" But yeah,
Right.
that's me. But
Well, you
so you also
had
have a
to
book.
probably, right? Like,
Oh
like,
yeah, oh
like,
yeah.
because here's the
As it,
thing: I never did hide or get rid of my accent, but I don't at all like blame people who do or hold it against them because I understand the reasons why you would, and I know that like in a lot of careers or industries or whatever, and I'm assuming journalism is probably one of them. Like, you almost have to, and but I always had such a chip on my shoulder about it ever since I was a kid because we had a lake in my hometown and people from the north had boats on that lake and would come down there in the summer. So it was like a small little tourist town, and all the tourists were from up north. And like everybody in my town knew, like the dynamic was, we were all the dumbass, backwards local yokels to them. They all looked down their noses at us and stuff like that. And so, like, I've never not been aware of that perception, but instead of like trying to change it, it made me, like the red ass in me, like we're just like fuck them. They don't know me. You know what I mean? Like just because I talk this way don't mean shit. They can kiss my ass. Like that was my attitude about it always. Like I ain't got to change my accent just for these motherfuckers. Like that, and that was always my sort of stance, as it were. And I'm very glad that I didn't because I would be remiss. It would be disingenuous for me not to acknowledge that my accent has been a huge part of all this for me and my whole thing, like without a doubt. So, you know, ended up working out, but I don't blame anybody that goes the other way.
oh
You know,
yeah, and that's I've had the same experience. That I mean, that's the funny part about it is it started as a joke, but now I basically do the same thing I did as a journalist, just in my shop. Rather
yeah,
than build. It's unique because people don't know that there is a wide diversity of thought in the South.
right,
Um,
right.
so tell us about the book. Don't you have a book?
Yeah. So I two of my best friends that I knew from doing stand up already before all this, Corey Forrester and Drew Morgan. Um, Whenever we all had the same manager before the videos went viral. We'd all been doing stuff together and been good friends for a long time before the videos went viral. And so after they did, immediately we were like, "Hey, let's go on tour." We always wanted to go on tour, and it seemed like an opportunity to. So that started pretty quickly. And around the same time, very very early on, like we got contacted by a literary agent who was like, "I think we could sell a book," and then we did, and it all happened very quickly. And this is 2016, and they wanted the agent and the publisher and everybody very much wanted this book to be out before the election just because it was like going to have political themes to it. And so what that meant was we had an insane timeline, unlike it's very unusual for a book to have. It was like 6 to 8 weeks or something for the bulk of the draft of it, which necessitated um, the three of us sort of co-writing it together in order to meet that. So the three of us wrote this book. It's the Liberal Redneck Manifesto, Dragging Dixie Out of the Dark. I'm going to be honest with you. We did not come up with that title. I've always had mixed feelings at best about that title. That was the publisher's call, but it is what it is. But either way, what the book basically is it's just an analysis and a topic by topic breakdown of like the stereotypes and perceptions and then on the other hand the actual realities of what people think about the South and what the South is. So in each chapter it's broken down by chapter, and each chapter is a different topic. So there's like a chapter on guns, on gun culture in the South. There's a chapter on race and race relations in the South. Then there's more lighthearted Southern subjects too. Like there's one on food and there's one on music. but then you got, there's one on religion. There's one on Southern women, like the whole Southern Belle thing and what that's really about. There's one on opioids. So it really like runs the gamut, but it's all the things that we thought were like the sort of cultural touchstones, or however you want to put it, of the South. And it was, on one hand, what do people think that it's like and that we are like where this is concerned, versus what is it really like, and also, what could we do better, what needs to change, that kind of thing. But we all three of us are very happy. Again, that was 2016, so I mean, it's been, 4 years ago we wrote that book, and it feels like a lifetime ago. It seems like another person did it almost. But having said that, we've always been proud of how it turned out and feel good about it. And it was very well received. People seemed to like it. It got good reviews and all that type of thing. So, I mean, I feel good about the book, but yeah, it also feels like something from a past life almost. It feels like it was so long ago. I mean, seriously, because it was like, that's the most insane period of my life, bar none, to date. And I can't imagine that it will ever be topped. I can't imagine there will ever be a more insane brief window of my life, because like the tour, the book, everything, quitting my day job, it was, and it's all a blur looking back on it, is my point. And part of that blur includes writing this book. but yeah, we're proud of it. We feel good about it.
So let me ask you this. I mean, your intent is comedy, but
Yeah.
how does it make you feel to know that your work, like the Charlottesville video,
Yeah.
that is actually gets used to reach out to people?
Right.
It does have political ramifications. I mean, people actually use that as a tool to reach out to others. I mean, I'm just
Um,
curious how you.
it's weird, honestly. I go back and forth on it. I'm kind of two minds about it, because again, I always want to be a comedian. I never wanted to be any kind of like activist or fucking provocateur or any kind of shit like that. Like, I just wanted to be a comedian. Having said that, I mean, I think it's cool anytime you can actually like reach somebody or start a conversation or whatever is great. I'm glad I have the ability to do that, because, like, again, it goes both ways. Because on the one hand, a lot of comics get frustrated because they feel like they can't ever be serious about anything if you're a professional comedian. And that's never been a problem for me. It's totally okay for me to be serious. People aren't put off by that. It doesn't, like, I can get away with being serious in a way that a lot of comedians can't, because of my whole thing. And that's an asset, and that's great. But the flip side of that is, I'm a comic at heart and everything. And like, man, sometimes I just want to, you know, just make some dick jokes or talk about, my wife or whatever. Just talk about silly shit, talking about my sons. I have two young sons. Talk about them and all the fart jokes they make or whatever. Like, just, silly, observational, daily life type stuff that doesn't have any weight to it and isn't supposed to. I, you know, I definitely feel sometimes like, not that I can't do that, but that's not what anybody wants or expects out of me. Like, I definitely feel I feel like a weird obligation to, like, talk about things, like, always. And I don't mind it, but sometimes it would be nice, to be able to just do some silly shit for a while. But don't get me wrong, I'm grateful and I wouldn't change any of it. But it is kind of a
Right,
complicated dynamic, for me.
right. Um, yeah, I can see that. I mean, my viewers are used to the whole, every once in a while I will just do something very satirical and, actually come out as a far right person and make an entire video about it. And it confuses newer viewers, but eventually they catch on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can definitely, there is a pressure to turn out the kind of content that the people who normally
Right.
support you. I mean, that makes sense.
Right.
And, for me, looking at your stuff, it's one of those things where I actually couldn't tell whether or not you set out to be uh, political or you were just funny. You know,
Mm,
like I wasn't really sure what the intent was. I mean, the end result is that you have content that can make people question what they believe, um, and that's,
yeah.
I mean, to me, it's useful.
Yeah, well, the thing that I think a lot of people may not understand is that, like, as far as, first of all, I don't really consider myself to have a like mission or anything, but like people ask me a lot about like my videos changing people's minds about things and whatnot. And normally, like the vast majority of the time when I get that question, they specifically mean like stereotypical rednecks in the South changing their mind about like progressive issues, right? That's what they're asking me. And like, yes, I know that that has happened. I have talked to people, and people have told me like that has happened at least a couple of times, but it's not like that. That's not that common. What is way, way, way more common is hearing from people from outside the South and everything who say that like my videos are influence them and change their mind about like how they looked at and felt about the South in general, like made them realize that, oh, they're not all the same, or the South's not a monolith or whatever. I've gotten that kind of response a shitload, and like that's important to me, like because like I said, like growing up in that tourist town, like really it all kind of comes back to that for me. Like that's what's at the core of all of it really for me, is more so than any one specific political issue or whatever. It's getting across to people or illustrate for people that like, hey, we're not all the same, or like it's, the South isn't a monolith. There is diversity, like you said. There's diversity of white thoughts and opinions too. It's not just between black and whites in the South or whatever. There's like, it's way more complicated than you realize, and don't assume things about people just based on where they're from, and getting all of that across is really sort of like the the foundational thing that I feel like most of my stuff and most of my work uh, comes from, really, both like stand up bits and all that, but also like I've been trying to get a TV show made for 4 years now or whatnot, still trying, and it's like with that it probably won't be hardcore political in like a topical way, but it will absolutely be based around trying to show a different side of the South than you would typically see on a TV show, because everybody it's usually some version of the same thing,
Yeah.
Beverly Hillbillies, blue collar comedy tour, something in that vein, and just simply doing something that is very, very Southern, but also not that, like very authentically Southern, but coming from a different place that people haven't seen before. Like just that alone is like what is a huge goal of mine, and is very important to me. So really, it all kind of comes back to that for me, more so than any one like progressive talking point or anything like that. Although I do believe all those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it seems, yeah, I don't think anybody doubts that that you actually believe that. I don't think I've never seen anybody say, "Oh, it's just a bit," and
Mm-hmm.
that those are really your views. Um, but so, and this is kind of unfair. I wish I had warned you about this one, because normally the people who come on here are activists. They are people who set out to do that. I always have one question I ask everybody, and
Okay.
that is, if you could give the people watching this one piece of advice as far as how they can change their community and better their community, what would it be?
I don't go into any kind of discourse with someone who is on the other side of you, automatically assuming from the very beginning that they are on the extreme polar opposite end of the spectrum from where you stand on it. Because I think that people do that a lot in America and maybe everywhere. But I'll give you a specific example from talking to my buddies back home. I still go back home every summer and go out on the lake. I can't this year because the world ended and all that. But as soon as we can go back, I will. and see all my buddies I grew up with and everything. And a lot of them are like me. A lot of them are totally on the same page as me politically. And then, some of them are not, but we've grown up together. We're really good friends. And some of them are conservatives. One of those trips, one of my good friends comes up to me and, we're standing there drinking beers or whatever. He walks up and he's like, Trae, my thing is, I just don't understand why. Or he goes, he's like, you've known me your whole life. You know, I work full time. I'm married. I'm a family man. I got two little girls. I never broke the law. Yada yada. What he's like, I just don't understand why you think that I shouldn't be able to own a gun. And I was like, I don't think that, Kobe. I don't at all think that. Like even a little bit. I was like, you absolutely should be able to own a gun. I was like, all I think is that there are plenty of people in this country who probably shouldn't, and we should, try to take steps to keep insane or violent people or whatever from being able to have a gun, because there are plenty of people who shouldn't have one, but you're not one of them. And I said that, and he was like, oh, I mean, yeah, I agree with you about that. He's like, definitely. There's definitely some people that don't, shouldn't have a gun or whatever. And so we ended up realizing or finding out that, like, we actually were like this far apart, like barely, if at all. Like we were pretty much in agreement about how we felt about guns, but we started it from this position of like, he thinks that I want to take everybody's guns, and I think he wants to give every eighth grader an assault rifle. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And neither one is true. And I think that people do that a lot. You find out that somebody's on the other side of an issue from you, and in your mind, you automatically put them in the extreme when most people are not extreme in their views, just period. And I think that skews a lot of the conversations and stuff from the very beginning. They can't even get started because people start from the wrong place. So I feel like that's some advice I would give people. Just try to keep that in mind, as you're going about your life and dealing with people. And I think that it will lead to, better relationships and things actually getting done and all of that good shit, I would hope.
Sounds good. So what's next? What projects do you have to plug? What are you doing next? Do you have a tour? Well, probably not right now, huh?
No, stand up comedy is illegal. And if we're being honest about it, I mean, when you think about it, live stand-up comedy requires a large number of people to be put close together in a relatively small space, and live stand-up comedy, let's just be frank here, really could not be less essential, right? So like I hope not. I would love for the tour to kick back up as soon as it's actually safe and all that, but like I personally think it's going to be a long time before we can do live shows again. And that sucks, but, it's out of our hands. Nothing I can do about it. So the tour is suspended indefinitely until things hopefully go back to normal. So with that in mind, and again, like I said, I've been trying to get these TV shows made. I've sold multiple shows and written multiple scripts that just didn't reach the finish line, didn't get shot. I had some that I was still working on. Those are also now just, put on pause until things go back to normal. So we have, me and the guys I mentioned earlier, Corey and Drew, have our podcast that we've been doing this whole time, the Well Read, that's Well, R-E-D, Well Read podcast. It comes out every week. We're still doing that via Zoom. Still, making videos and stuff, trying to do some different things now with the lockdown, some like Zoom sketches and whatnot, and just putting them out on the social pages. And the only like real, like legitimate thing I have to plug is I have a Facebook watch show with this media company called Attention Media, and the show is called South and Off, and it's kind of similar to the format of the book. It's like each little episode, like 5-minute episodes, and each episode is about one particular subject, and it's some Southern specific, topic or phenomenon or perception or whatever. And we did one season last year, and we just filmed on quarantine. Like I set this little studio in my house out here in Burbank and filmed it all myself and animating it and graphics and all that. But we're putting that out starting next week, South and Off season 2. And so like this year, there's topics from like, you know, the myth of the Southern Belle, coal country, conservative versus conservation, diversity, Southern diversity, like you mentioned earlier. That's the subject of one of the episodes, and Southern innovations, contributions that the South has made to like America as a whole. So just and then a few more. So those are some of the subjects that are covered, and those will come out weekly starting Monday, the what is that, the 11th, next Monday. So South and Off season 2, and then after that, man, hell if I know. I don't know. Hopefully something will come up. I'm just trying to keep busy, but mostly I'm just sitting around and trying to keep my wife and I from losing our minds with these children who can't go to school, anymore. Trying to homeschool them and just maintain our sanity, basically.
Right. Yeah. No, I definitely, definitely can relate. I actually had the same thing. We had something planned this summer to go on tour, and we the whole thing just kind of fell apart. And I'm like, well, now I don't know what I'm going to do, which is nice on one level,
Right.
because I'm still out of the country. I don't have to go anywhere.
Yeah.
But
I don't mind. I honestly don't mind being at home. I love my family. I love being at home with them. Um, but yeah, the uncertainty of it all and not knowing, you know, what is going to happen. But hell, everybody is in that position right now, right? Nobody knows what's going to happen. So, I'll be all right.
all right. So you got any final thoughts you want to get out there?
Um, I don't know. Just, I guess everybody just try to, you know, keep your heads down and soldier on. Like I'm weird. People might not pick up on this or might expect otherwise, but I actually am like ultimately an optimist about things, and I always have been. And I think part of that is because like I grew up in the rural South. Like, look, the rural South has still got a lot of work left to do and a lot of progress left to be made. But I don't care what anybody says. Just in my lifetime, it has changed an insane amount for the better. I mean, like I never ever would have believed that at this point in my life, like when I was a teenager or whatever, that gay marriage would even be legal, let alone like, kind of almost normalized at this point, which is a good thing. But I never, if you'd have told me that when I was 18, you're not living in Salina, Tennessee, I told you you're out of your goddamn mind. Like, but, it's happened. And people in my hometown, are not, they've come a long way. And I know that for a fact. And I believe that ultimately, one way or another, we will continue to progress in the right direction, little hiccups and speed bumps aside. So, I just think everybody just hang in there and we'll get it figured out eventually.
Sounds good. All right, everybody, that's the show. It's just a thought. Y'all try to have a good night.